As you may or may not be aware, there is a new exploit that has recently released for the Xbox 360 known as BadUpdate. This is a software exploit that only requires a USB key and any Xbox 360 console. And this is kind of a big deal because this is the very first time in the history of the Xbox 360 that a software-only hypervisor exploit has been discovered. And we touched on it briefly in last week's episode when we talked about all things Tony Hawk Pro Skater. And in today's episode, we're going to take a close look at this new hypervisor exploit, how it all works, how it performs in the real world, and exactly the things you can and can't do with this software-only hypervisor exploit. Now, right off the jump, let's get a few things out of the way first. BadUpdate is a software-only hypervisor exploit for the Xbox 360 that opens up the console for unsigned code execution, i.e. homebrew, region-free games, custom dashboards, and all that stuff just like a regular JTAG or RGH modded Xbox 360. However, it's all done in software, and it all works on any Xbox 360 variants with the latest firmware, including the Winchester motherboards. Now, if you don't believe me, here's my 360E with the Winchester motherboard running the hypervisor exploit without any smoke and mirrors. I can launch into Aurora, various homebrew, and even OG Xbox games via backcompat. Everything just works. Now, if this sounds too good to be true, it's 100% real. However, there are definitely some things that you want to be aware of before you dive in and try to do this yourself. And we're going to talk about all of that stuff in this episode. The first thing to mention is this exploit has a reliability of around 30% in how it works. In other words, this process of exploiting your Xbox 360 via BadUpdate is going to take a little bit of your time. I personally have run the exploit about 10 times since I've installed it, and I will say on average it takes about 10 to 15 minutes in my experience to run successfully. But be prepared to shut off your Xbox 360 and retry a couple of times before the exploit itself finally takes. And the reason for this is that the exploit takes advantage of a thread race condition in order for the hypervisor to be exploited. Now that's the bad news. The good news is that you don't need to spend a single dollar on exploiting your Xbox 360. All you need is a FAT32 formatted USB stick and some patience. I've run this exploit many times and I've got a pretty good handle on everything. Now, we can't call this a soft mod, and in many ways it's far less practical and useful than a JTAG or RGH modded system, which is still very much the preferred way to go. But RGH or JTAGing your system does turn a lot of people away because there is a multi-step process involved in order to dump the NAND and extract your CPU keys, then rebuild the NAND and then flash it back as a custom firmware. All this simply goes away. But we have to be aware that this exploit is tethered, which means that as soon as you turn off the power of your Xbox 360, if you want to get access to homebrew and unsigned code access, you have to rerun the exploit every single time. And because the Xbox 360 has no concept of sleep or rest mode, once the power is turned off, or the system crashes for any reason, if you want to exploit your hypervisor, you need to rerun that exploit every single time. And finally, every single executable that runs via this method, every single .xex or Xbox executable will need to be patched first. So in other words, if you use Aurora to download files from the homebrew store, none of them will run. They'll need to be manually patched, and this can definitely be an issue for some people. However, what this method does provide is a very simple way to exploit your Xbox 360 without ever opening up your system. You can extract your CPU keys, dump your NAND, and still enjoy almost the entire range of awesome Xbox 360 homebrew, emulators, games, utilities, all for the price of $0. Now previously, the only way that you could run the Xbox 360 hypervisor exploit known as BadUpdate was to use Tony Hawk's American Wasteland. And this was one of those Tony Hawk games that we covered on the last episode that can be exploited by hacking the save file. And many of you were quick to tell me that the price of Tony Hawk's American Wasteland had skyrocketed on sites such as eBay. And this is absolutely true. But the good news is you don't even need a copy of Tony Hawk's American Wasteland anymore. So all those weirdo scalpers that are trying to flip the game for $150 on eBay are going to effectively lose money on a game that no one needs to buy. One of the great things about the Xbox 360 is that all Xbox Live Arcade games, or XBLA games, by default can be installed and run from a USB stick without any additional modification. This was one of the great things about XBLA games back in the day, that any game could be installed and run in trial mode, or effectively as a demo of sorts. This would allow you to play maybe the first couple of levels of a game without the ability to unlock achievements. But the great thing about the trial versions of an XBLA game is that the trial version is also the retail version. The only difference is that you need to purchase and unlock the retail version. And this was really cool back in the day because you could easily install demos on your Xbox 360, and if you enjoyed the game, you could simply unlock it and have the full retail version without doing anything else. And when it comes to running the BadUpdate exploit, you don't need American Wasteland. You can simply install the trial version of Rock Band Blitz onto your USB stick and then launch it from there. So let's go ahead now and run this exploit. You need a couple of things. Obviously, the first thing is an Xbox 360, any model will do, and a FAT32 formatted USB stick. The first check is to make sure that your firmware on the Xbox 360 is running 17.559. Now, if you're not on it, you need to update. Now, to do this, you just need to download a link that I'll leave in the description below, install it on the root of a USB stick, and then install it that way. It should just launch and detect an update is available if you haven't already updated. Now, of course, just like any modded Xbox 360, you want to make sure to stay off the network, because you may run the risk of a console ban. So to do this, simply go into the system menu, then disconnect from either the wireless or the wired network. Pretty simple stuff. Now, if this particular Xbox 360 has an Xbox Live profile that auto signs in, I would also recommend disabling that step. In fact, I strongly recommend that you create an offline user profile for this exploit. On my Xbox 360E here, I have two that I flip between. Player 1, which is the default username that gets created, as well as Bad Exploit User. Now, with your USB stick, download the Xbox 360 BadUpdate Retail 1.1 from the GitHub repository, and then extract the files based on the game that you're using. Now, in 99% of cases, you're probably going to be using Rock Band Blitz, because I don't think anyone really needs to be using Tony Hawk's American Wasteland. The trial game can then be found on the DigiX website, and I'll leave a link to that in the description below. And what you want to do is extract the contents of the Rock Band Blitz trial onto the root of the USB stick. Now, you can also pause at this point and insert the USB stick into your Xbox 360. You should be able to see Rock Band Blitz in the list of games. This means that you've installed the game in the right location. If you haven't, then just double check your steps. Now, at this point, you have everything you need to do to exploit your Xbox 360. However, you still need to get homebrew, applications, and whatever else you want to run on this system. Now, if you want to do anything useful with an exploited Xbox 360, the piece of software that you want to download is known as FreeMyZ. What FreeMyZ does is apply various patches to perform things like run unsigned content, extract and display the CPU key, run homebrew, and with this new Beta 4 update, allow OG Xbox games to run via backcompat. So this is definitely something you want to download as well. Now, if you take a look at the BadUpdate payload folder on your USB stick, there is a file here called default.xex. This is a executable that runs once the hypervisor has been exploited, which is basically a small demo to show that unsigned code is running successfully. So what you want to do is download the FreeMyZ Beta 4 and extract the freemyz.xex file, then delete the existing default.xex and then rename freemyz.xex to default.xex. Now, the other thing that I recommend you do is create a separate folder on the root of the USB stick called FreeMyZ and extract the entire contents of the FreeMyZ Beta 4 into that folder. And this is because if you want to run OG Xbox games via backcompat or launch into Xel or Linux, then you still need the additional files that are found on this archive. Now, the next thing that we need to do is install a custom dashboard. Unfortunately, we can't use something like Aurora to do this directly. We need a way to access some type of homebrew from the My Games menu. And to do this, we use XEX menu. This is a very basic custom dashboard, but it does have a live version which will show up in the My Games menu and can be launched once the BadUpdate exploit has run successfully. So download the XEX menu v1.1 version from Digix and then click on the XEX menu 1.1 folder, then double click on the XEX menu v1.1-live. Now on your USB stick, select the contents folder, enter the folder with all these zeros. Now what you want to do is drag the code 9999 folder into the contents 00000 folder on the USB stick. So it should look like this if you extracted it in the right place. So at this point, you have pretty much everything you need to do to exploit your system, run a custom dashboard, but you still need to get whatever homebrew, apps, games, custom dashboards, whatever backcompat OG Xbox games you could want to run. Now this is something I'm not going to cover here, but my very two good friends of the channel, Mr. Mario 2011 and Modded Warfare, have both done comprehensive guides on these, and I'll leave links in their videos in the description below, and I do recommend you check them out if you want to set up your system and kind of configure it the way you want to. However, there is one piece of very important homebrew that you need to install, and that is known as Simple NAND Flasher. This will dump the contents of your NAND on your system and then just write it onto your USB stick. Then you can take this file and keep it for safekeeping. It also will extract your CPU key and write that out to a file. These are things that you'll need for safekeeping just in case your system gets bricked and you need some kind of way to recover. And of course, you can install additional homebrew anywhere you want on your USB stick. You can also use your custom dashboard to copy it to the Xbox's hard drive, but before we can run any Xbox 360 executables, they do need to be patched with a tool known as XEX tool. This is important because nothing will run otherwise, at least not right now. And to do this, we'll use a simple example of the Simple NAND Flasher. I've extracted it to the root of my USB stick, and to patch this, you need to use the following parameters: xextool.exe-m-r-a, and then the name of the XEX file, which in this case is default.xex. It should let you know that the file was successfully patched. From here, you're good to go. Everything you need to exploit your hypervisor is ready to rock. Now to run everything, just insert the USB stick into the Xbox 360, power on the system, sign into your offline profile that you created earlier, and then you should see XEX menu and Rock Band Blitz in your My Games folder. Now to run the exploit, what you want to do is launch Rock Band Blitz, and this is where the fun starts. If you haven't signed into your profile yet, it will ask you to do this as your first step. Then press A and the words running exploit will be displayed on the screen. Now this is the process where the BadUpdate exploit will attempt to gain access to the hypervisor, and there are a few things that you need to know here. If after 20 minutes your system isn't doing anything, then you need to turn off the Xbox 360 and start again. There is a visual clue. If the background animation does freeze, that will let you know that the exploit has failed, and then you need to turn off the system and then retry. Now, if you are lucky, after 10 to 15 minutes or so, you'll see this screen pop up. This means that the exploit has run successfully, and it's a good reminder to make a note of your CPU key. So take a photo of this particular screen and just keep it for safekeeping. Now, once this message pops up, press A again, and the hypervisor will be patched. From here, you can go back into your My Games menu, and you can successfully launch into XEX menu, and then from here, you can run any homebrew that you patched with XEX tool previously. And there you have it. You have a fully exploited Xbox 360 with just a USB key and some patience. I've also been able to run most things, including Aurora custom dashboard, OG Xbox games via backcompat, various Xbox 360 region-free games, and of course emulators. This particular exploit doesn't really hold a candle to an RGH or a JTAG hacked system, but it is something you can do with just a USB stick, and that is pretty damn cool. Now, for those people that are wondering if this exploit will ever get faster or it will ever turn into a jailbroken solution or a soft modded solution, the answer is probably no, due to the way the Xbox 360 security works and the hypervisor works. Unfortunately, it's probably as good as it's going to get. Now, there may be ways to kind of streamline the boot process in order to configure the XEX files that you launch into directly, and that may be something that gets patched or updated in the FreeMyZ revisions in a later version. But if we're talking about the exploit itself, that 30% success rate is probably not going to improve anytime soon, if at all. But I do think that this is a small price to pay. If you do have a little bit of patience, you can still very easily exploit any Xbox 360 as we've seen on this particular episode. And if you're wondering about how this was all done, the kind of technical write-up on this exploit itself, I will leave a link to all of that in the description below. Once again, this particular exploit was done by Grimdoomer, who was also responsible for the Tony Hawk exploits that we covered on the channel last week. He's done an amazing job hacking the Xbox 360, and it's just a really nice kind of way to bookend the life of the Xbox 360 at the end with a software-only exploit. This is pretty damn cool. At the end of the day, this is an awesome little update for anyone that's into the Xbox 360. But we're going to leave it here for today's episode. This is obviously very exciting news for the Xbox 360 community, and I'll definitely be covering any future updates that may come out of the BadUpdate exploit or any additional enhancements that get done to FreeMyZ in a future episode. But for now, we're going to leave it here for today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, please don't forget to leave me a thumbs up, and we'll catch you in the next video. Bye for now.